Just for it too.
I will call this meeting of the Guilford Budget Committee to order. If you have your cell phones turned off or on vibrate, that would be greatly appreciated. And if we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, Selectman Grenier.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For those that have not had a chance, if you could just take a quick look at the minute meetings from the December 20th minutes, meeting. And Angela,
Yes.
in the school district food services subcommittee report,
Yes.
8th line down, I believe that Jonathan is spelled wrong.
Okay. I'll double check on that.
Any other corrections, omissions? And hearing none, is there a motion to accept the minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes of 20th December 2018 as presented.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Seconded by Mr. Karagianis. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, and any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Any comments from the members of the public that are here? And hearing none, I will now turn the floor over to Nick from the Gunstock Acres Village Water District.
Thank you. My name's Nick Schedule. I'm a commissioner with the Village Water District. Just here to present our proposed budget for your guys' recommendation. I got a copy to you just now, and I can kind of go line by line. It's not very much. The executive line stayed the same. It covers our stipends. The financial administration, I'm trying to be more transparent in our funding, not just using one line item. So that covers our accounting and the bills going out for our water bills. Line 4196 is our insurance cost. And then line 4332 covers our water services, so that's our maintenance and operation of our water distribution system. The final line is basically a balancing between our 2 warrant articles. We fund operations and maintenance, and then a capital reserve fund with 2 warrant articles. So that line on 4913 is a transfer to the capital reserve fund from the funds that raised under warrant article for operations. And then I think I need to change. I wanted to change line 4915 and move it to 4916. I was told by Department of Revenue Administration that, our capital reserve fund is actually a expendable trust fund, when it was set up. So that's the fund we've been continuing to put money into for capital improvement projects, in our system, so, I plan to move that line, like I said, to 4916 in order to be compliant with them. Revenues, we raise revenues through, a couple of sources, mostly our mostly from our water rates and our hookup fees. That's, what's raised in, line 3401. And then we, get some income from interest on our capital reserve fund, that we have. And then, the other, item is that, 10,495 that gets transferred in from the other warrant article. And then, the way our budget gets balanced at the end of the year is through a precinct tax, which essentially, makes up the difference between what we can raise with our water rates and what, we need to spend to go into our, both our capital reserve and our operation and maintenance, so, generally, most of our precinct tax money goes into the capital reserve fund. This year, we're looking at about 94,505. We've generally kept our precinct tax, the same. We're looking to have a slight increase in our water rates in order to maintain that precinct tax around the same rate. So we're looking at about a 2.5% increase in our water rates, and we're hoping that kind of keeps our precinct tax right about where it is. So that's it.
Do have a couple of questions as we're going through this. I notice on page 2 you have appropriations ending for period 12/31/2018, and there are numbers there. But if you go to page 3 has some as well. But then there were some other areas where you've got it going forward, such as on page 5, operating transfers out. In the bottom area to capital projects fund, you've got 10,495. Nothing in the previous year. I guess just walking through this. Also on page 8, it doesn't look like you've got any revenues for the most part, and that actual revenues for period ending 12/31/2018. Page 9, you've got charges for services, for instance. At the top, 272,238, but you didn't get anything in.
Yeah,
So I'm a little confused why we've got numbers going forward and nothing from the past.
my guess is that it's, using the DRA website in order to generate the form. That's how we generate this form, is through the budget portal, or the state portal.
Yeah. Okay.
My guess is that because the information from the actual for fiscal year 2018 hasn't been entered in that form, then it doesn't automatically populate this form. So this form actually, that column is automatically being populated based on another form. As best as I can tell, as I'd say a volunteer trying to understand the DRA's portal. So I think in terms of where there's differences on the appropriation side, that is just trying to be as accurate as I possibly can in doing this. In terms of what happened previous years, I think that number, as soon as I think it's the 535, 535 form, which is actual expenditures that you fill out, once the fiscal year's over and you go back in.
Okay.
I assume that's when that gets populated, but I would have to talk with, my advisor at DRA in order to answer that question, unfortunately.
I think here in Guilford, that would be,
Michelle Clark is
oh,
who I
Michelle,
work with.
okay.
Yeah.
Cause it's kinda hard looking at this budget to go, okay, is this spot on, is it way off minus, way off
Yeah.
plus?
I can
Since
tell
I don't-
you,
Do you folks
from
keep,
previous years, 737 forms, I've got a working budget that has those numbers. I can tell you what those numbers were from previous years on this same form. It's not gonna be the same as what that column is, because I think that column is actually representing actual expenditures versus a budget form, so,
now, when you said that this form is being automatically filled in, is that something you are responsible for entering that data in the first place, or is that something that DRA does? Cause I'll admit, I'm unfamiliar with this 737.
we're responsible for doing it and at certain times, so, typically the deadline for when that 535 form that gets completed and submitted to the state, I don't know when it is, but it's springtime, I think, after the fiscal year's over, for the calendar year.
Okay.
And then, in terms of, I haven't presented this before at the budget, committee, so in
Okay.
terms of what the form looked like before, I don't know if, I can't be sure that had columns, had items filled in before or not,
Okay.
so,
No, and I don't mean to put you on the spot.
no, I know,
okay?
yeah, I mean, it is what it is in terms of not having,
You don't have to,
amounts on those columns.
you don't happen to keep an unofficial, official spreadsheet watching over these things that you could perhaps forward to us later on that would have that information? Or is just what's been put into DRA is what you've got?
I mean, we've got an unofficial, official spreadsheet that has, on this spreadsheet, it has, MS 737 previous forms, which are previous budgets. It doesn't have the actual number,
Okay,
the actual expenditure number. As soon as we can't complete that until we have our January meeting, because we'll get our December, report from our operators that have costs for December. Once we have that meeting, we could officially complete the actual expenditures for the year. And then once we complete that I would imagine that column would fill in itself. Now, I can confirm that with Michelle beforehand, so I know that that's gonna happen, but, unfortunately, I won't be able to do that until our meeting, which is, I think second Wednesday of the month, so.
okay.
I don't know that it's before the 10th, when the public meeting is for the budget discussion.
Peter, you have a question? Yeah, just was wondering, what is currently in the capital reserve fund?
It's in the magnitude of $400,000. I don't have an exact number tonight, unfortunately.
Nick, the 94,005 that's raised from taxes, what's that tax called again?
It's a precinct tax. So it's a tax that goes on to homes that are identified within the precinct of Gunstock Acres Village Water District. So it's homes that we serve.
So it's the same people that pay the water bills.
Correct.
Why the need for a tax and a water, and a water bill? Why, do you have any idea? Or is that-
It's as long as I've been there, that's how it's been. I think there's probably a reason, but I don't know what that is. Since I've been involved, I think I've just tried to keep it about where it's at and looked at raising rates in order to do that. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough if there's something tied with, I think you could argue that, if it's money going into our capital improvement fund, that it's separate from water rates, and we don't have meters within our system, so our rates are flat fees on houses, so,
It's a plug figure, is it not?
yeah.
Right?
I-
So we don't go up and down with the fees, we let this precinct tax as a plug provides kind of the filler. That's the way it's been done.
Okay.
I think it's always been necessary in order to balance what our revenues are versus our expenditures towards the end of the year, and we, that tax goes on to the second half of people's tax bill, so they get a report from us in October that says, where we're tracking for expenditures, and then they'll set the tax rate based on, filling in that gap between revenue and, expenditures. Why is our revenue not all generated from water rates? That's kind of the way it's been and, has been.
So maybe I can help you guys too, because I have the spreadsheet that they use. So it's a pretty simple P&L. So there's de minimis amount of interest on the capital reserve fund. The de minimis amount of revenue comes in from new builds. So in Gunstock Acres, that might be 1 or 2, maybe a year. And the rest is everyone pays a flat fee for water. It's all you can drink for one fee. And then there's the precinct tax, which is a filler. And I think the issue that when we talked about it at the last budget meeting that I was participating in, there is a reticence on the part of the commissioners to reduce that precinct tax towards zero by all of a sudden just jumping up the water rate. So the last time they jumped the water rate up by a reasonable amount, there was a tremendous amount of pushback, and these volunteers just don't want that much agony. So if you keep things the way they are, the agony is reduced, and that's a simple, am I not kind of right on
That's
it?
pretty accurate.
Yeah. And then there's basically de minimis expenses for, postal box rental, de minimis accounting costs, water bill printings, officer stipends, which are pretty de minimis, and then it's just straight running the water. So it's chemicals, engineering. Every time there's something that breaks and we need to fix something, we have to have an engineering study that's done. There's insurance on like a D&O basis, and then there's all the maintenance categories for every time there's a water break, the water contractor, major equipment repairs. Every time something breaks, the road has to get dug up, there has to be paving for that. And then there's just electricity, we have de minimis sewer usage, telephone, and that's it, and water testing. So it's a pretty simple and clean P&L. Even though this 9 pages makes it seem like it's pretty complicated, because almost everything's a zero.
Yeah, and that does speak to our expenses are not predictable, because a good amount of our expenses are dealing with breaks and emergency labor associated with that. So I think there's hesitation to raise the rates to over-generate revenue if we don't know exactly what our expenditures are gonna be. But I mean, I guess, and I think Jack's point about not wanting to increase our rates to make that go to zero all at once is not something we're willing to do.
How many how many homes does this cover?
We have about 450 homes. We have additional accounts that get a water rate charge for vacant properties. So there's another 250 or so of those.
Chris?
And is there any income from the general fund at all, or general taxation for the whole town at all? Everything is encapsulated by the users, correct?
Correct.
will entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion that
Page
we.
5 on 11.
10, 11.
Nick, what's the total amount? Is it the 275, 238?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you need to make recommendations on both our warrant articles, or if you just do the total appropriation, or just the amount raised by, precinct tax.
I think we just vote to approve or disapprove, as I recall.
Scott, we gotta,
No, we have to do the warrant
So if you
articles.
do the bottom line number, and that includes the warrant articles, then the recommendation would do the same for all three. So you can do that, or you can pull them out, however you want to do it.
I think the proper thing to do would be to look at each warrant article, because each one is a separate appropriation.
Rather than do the whole.
Yeah.
So if you, on page 10 of 11, kind of breaks down the operating budget appropriations, the warrant article, and that's our first warrant article is our election officer. Our second warrant article is our operating budget appropriation. And then our third warrant article is our special warrant for, payment into the expendable trust fund.
Do we have copies of the warrants in this packet?
Yeah,
No.
I didn't see it.
no,
I didn't see it. So the whole town has to vote on your appropriation?
No.
I think
We have
just
to.
the budget committee.
Okay.
Our
And then they vote on it
district
separate.
needs a budget committee to review our budget and make a recommendation on it. Because we're a village district, we, operate under state law that requires a budget committee to review our budget. That budget committee is you. Because we operate within the town of Guilford, the town's budget committee is our budget committee. So, I've never seen it on our warrant articles that it says this warrant article is recommended by this. We don't even put our recommendations on our warrant articles. We never have, and nobody's asked us to, so we don't do it. And we've never put your recommendations on our warrant articles. I think you just have to review our budget.
Right.
You sign our this, because it's a draft, I need to now go in, if you're gonna agree with this, I'm gonna go in and put in your agreed numbers, the same numbers, that column, budget committee's appropriations, right? So I'll put in the budget committee's appropriations, that second column from the right, and I'll put in, if you guys approve it, I'll put in the same numbers. If you wanna put in a different number, tell me what it is, and I'll write it down, and I'll put that into the form. The form will get finalized, blessed by DRA. This draft page will become a signature page, and you'll sign this signature page. So I'll have to come, assuming you're gonna make your recommendations tonight, I'll update the form, and I can get it back to you for the 10th.
yeah, that'd be perfect.
So I still, I guess, would want a recommendation for all of your lines. Or, each line item that I have something, I guess I need a recommendation from you on whether I'm putting the same number in or something different.
That's where the one vote on one number makes it easy.
Or the whole packet. I'll make a motion to accept the draft of the Dogstark Acres MS 737 form for review at a later point when the budget committee's numbers are filled in. Is that too much?
That doesn't sound right.
No,
Yes.
that does not sound right at all.
Okay.
A number.
Yeah, the 94,505.
Okay.
Because you're not proposing any changes.
Right.
I would do the total
Yeah, why
appropriation,
isn't it the total appropriations 380, 238?
Oh, okay, yes, that makes
So
sense.
I will entertain a motion then for the 380,238.
I will second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion?
Sure, of course. I know that I'm gonna vote no on this, because just looking at an MS form is insufficient for us to really look at it. We're supposed to be looking at, being able to take a look what's happened in the past, see where they are now, and then take a look at what their numbers are going forward. This MS form, which is for the benefit of DRA, not for us, for me, does not pass that test. So, I really,
Can I ask what you've done in the past?
well, that's part of my problem. I'm sitting here going, I wish I could remember, and I can't. But I know right now, this would not be, this would be better.
What we had in the past was just a sheet of paper,
Yep.
budget,
yeah.
line items,
And that was it.
bottom figure, and we voted yes or no to approve it. We have no control over it. It's your,
Yeah.
it's
I
your
mean,
Well-
thing.
you can
It's
say- I mean, make any recommendation you want,
This
I
is a
can tell you what's gonna
formality,
happen
really.
at the annual
just
meeting.
to,
Well,
so
actually,
we've seen it and we
Nick?
talked about it.
Nick, do you have enough copies of
I've
this
got
for
10 of
everybody?
those, I didn't print.
I mean, this is,
All of them. If
this
you guys wanna
helps.
share 'em, and, I
Yeah,
mean,
we
it's
can
up to
share.
you.
Yeah, we can share.
We can share.
I mean, this gives us the kind of information that I'm looking for.
It's not editable
That's a
by
chair.
Excel format.
Yeah, this is what we're used to reviewing. This is what we're used to.
Yeah,
This is what we're
definitely- Okay.
Yes, you did.
Maybe I only printed 5, not 10, so.
We'll just
Okay.
share and look at it.
And that one has a couple of my notes on it for
Yeah.
2019.
Okay,
this
there's,
is
there's 16,
more like what
17,
we had.
18.
Right.
But it was more like it was on your screen.
Yeah,
But
that's,
I don't think we presented that in the past, but maybe they have.
But what I could see
No,
here on your
It's hard
screen
to
was
say, cause some years you guys
literally
have,
what we usually
and some
get.
years
Oh.
you guys have.
The line
It's
item
kinda-
thing.
Last year, I don't remember
Number.
doing it till the
I would just recommend next year doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this
I
be
would.
helpful.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd say we're trying
Okay.
to put it on track.
It's at the bottom, all of this is exactly how it looks.
Yeah. Aren't we
Well,
all?
that was the 105.
I'm a volunteer
So
that
it's
didn't run for office.
But you said, Nick, but you said yes.
That's okay, Suzanne said 238.
Drink some
Close
water.
enough. That's,
Okay.
yeah, it's 275, 238.
Yeah, emergency labor.
105,000 to transfer. Which is,
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I hesitated to give you this is because we are in the process of trying to get better about accurately putting stuff in the correct columns, so that's gonna look strange to people who are just looking at it, line by line, and not hearing, if you guys wanna get into the discussion line by line, I mean, I guess we can do that. I wasn't prepared for it tonight, so I'm not gonna, you're gonna get a lot of, I'll have to get back to you and stuff like that, but, I mean,
yeah, that's the
That's
thing.
on the bottom line,
I wanna go
unless I'm missing
Now,
something.
Nick,
Yeah.
the motion is for 380, 238, and yet, I do not see 380, 238 on here.
I don't have my copy.
Am I? Am I like doing one then?
I like this little summary down here. But that doesn't have big next to you.
Yeah, it also shows an income, so, on our budget forms, we're not gonna show any kind of an income. This has an income and it kinda just gives us a little bit of a buffer, and so I
80. Yeah, I'm not. I'm trying to figure out how this 380 number is derived from.
That number's right there,
That
275,
number's
238.
there. Where's the, which?
And nothing's falling down at the
this
bottom.
was $300.
Now, the rest, I can't figure
Two
this out.
seventy-five, 238 is right there. And then the 105 is there. And the 105 there.
Hey, Nick,
Yeah, so there's.
I'm trying to get
no total
the
line.
spreadsheet up that you guys use, but we had we had like a positive budget balance of like $300 and something.
This and this. Yeah, that's right.
So you can take two,
It's this, plus that. That's it. Cause we don't have anything to do with the revenues, cause that's, yeah, it's 380, 238.
How-
It's there, Nick.
How are you deriving it?
Look at the
Income line.
income total,
Yep.
2019 budget, which is 275, 238.
Oh, there it is.
Add in the MM transfer of 105,000, equals 380, 238.
That's a lot of money.
Thank you, Peter.
no, I thought that was summed at the,
Yeah, and I think,
Okay.
Jack, to answer your question, my precinct tax on my form came out at 94,505, and in our budget form, we had it listed as 95,000. So that might be that difference we were talking about when we had our meeting.
Okay, so there's the income.
Yeah, this.
So I can see how the 380,235 is derived at, with the income total plus MM transfer. But now, that's the income versus appropriations, which is spent, so that's half the ledger. Income and expenses. So everything should be dropping down to expense total, but that's, your total appropriation is 257,293. No, second from the bottom.
What's the 257, 239 plus 17,945? I think that's gonna be 275, 238.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Right?
Yep.
So those two items on the bottom, that's our total expenses, because it's
Yeah.
income, which is, shouldn't be in there, it should be in there as an expense. We're not gonna end up with any income at the end of the day.
So that balances that
So that
total
balances
income line.
The
The total income line balances with that.
That balances the operating budget appropriation.
Alright. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, the revenue,
Yeah, percent of it.
That's just how we're getting the numbers, but that doesn't make sense.
Okay, is there any further discussions? And hearing none,
I'm not even sure how to ask it.
the motion is on the table and has been seconded by Tracy for $380,238. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
thank you.
And Nick, we will see you next Thursday.
it's pretty fun. I mean, I don't know what the spreadsheet is.
Yes.
On the spreadsheet that I had, I did it
Thank you,
for
Nick.
his house right before Christmas.
And now I will turn
And I must have saved it to that way, so I
Yeah.
have
the floor over to Mr.
I
Dunn.
just, I can't make it work.
Thank you, good evening.
We'll talk
So you have
later,
a
maybe.
bunch of material in front of you tonight, and I'll walk you through the small amount of changes that have been made by the Board of Selectmen. First, I would just call your attention on the worksheet for the second column over called FY 2018 actuals. The figures you have here are through the end of November. This will be updated for the public hearing next week for figures through the end of December. There won't be final year-end figures, there will be presentation built in January, but they will be updated for that period. So let me just walk you through a couple of the changes, and then I'll let you know what it is you folks will need to vote on tonight. So the first change, I'll call your attention to page 6 of the spreadsheet. About 3/4 of the way down the bottom, the line number we're looking at is 4902-835, which is fireboat lease payments. The selectmen have, deleted their budget by $54,216, and that is because there's money left over in the 2018 budget that the board has voted to encumber, and that will be used to make those lease payments in 2019. So there won't be a need for this $54,216. The other thing I wanted to mention, just by way of a general overview, as the budget committee has gone through its numbers and made changes to the budget, the selectmen have taken those up, and in every instance, the selectmen have voted to go along with the budget committee's recommendations. So for the most part, your numbers are the same, except for these changes that we're gonna go over tonight. So the selectmen's budget has been reduced by $54,216 for that reason. The next item I will call your attention to is on page 12 of the spreadsheet. And about a quarter of the way down, we're looking at line item 4902-826, fire radio system improvements. That's a capital budget item. It had been approved by the selectmen and the budget committee for $46,000. The selectmen have taken that out of the budget because they've made that purchase in 2018. So the budget, that capital item has been reduced by $46,000, and the selectmen have eliminated the warrant article that was intended to raise that $46,000. So my first suggestion to the budget committee tonight would be to vote to delete that $46,000 from the special warrant articles.
So, can I ask you a question? So
Roger.
essentially you guys had extra funds and you could accelerate the purchase, that's what you did, okay?
Chris?
Was there an emergency need to do so?
No. Well, I mean, at least as far as the fire radios go, define emergency. I mean, they're gonna get them months quicker.
I just recall an outrage about a lawnmower that was bought
Yeah.
with surplus funds, so I just.
Well, I was
I just wanna make sure we have equal playing fields here.
I was gonna bring that up, and it,
Must
I-
have been
I-
a hell of a lawnmower.
it's about $25,000. I guess I just have this thing where if you're following along in the budget process to begin with, and then all of a sudden at the end, because you've got spare money, I would rather have seen that gone into the funds and just continue on with the process as has already been laid out for these expenditures. It makes it far easier and it's far more transparent than just say, oops, we got this extra money, let's just buy it now. You know, it's like the year-end fire sale that goes on all the time in all levels of government, and I just find that extremely distasteful. So, I'm sorry to see it here. I would rather have gone through with the regular budgetary process. So, yes, I have done so on the school side, and I'm doing it here on this side too. I wish to register my dismay over this. Which also means going back to the other one that was just talked about on page 6. You know, same process there, and same amount of discouragement there. You know, it's always nice to end it earlier. I mean, I'm sorry, to have funds left over at the end of the year. But again, for transparency and looking back, I don't think it's a good move. I would rather have seen this money gone back to the taxpayers. I mean, it is their money. So from that standpoint, yeah, not overjoyed.
So can I ask you?
Go ahead,
So
Ken.
if, maybe I'm just misunderstanding this, if they accelerate 2 purchases and take them out of the 19 budget, Isn't that, in a way, coming back to the taxpayer?
Absolutely.
Maybe, depending if this is done again next year. And
We're
then
taking
it's,
the money out of
it's-
next year's budget, so we don't have to raise it from the voters next year, because we
right, but
made
it,
the purchases with money that's already been appropriated.
But it takes the decision out of the taxpayer's hands, so that there's going to be a warrant article which they could have voted down, but now it's just gonna be purchased.
right,
I would say that's probably more true in this instance, not so much in the other instance.
Right. But I'm talking about the radios.
Right.
Yeah.
So the selectmen have purchased the radios for $35,000 this year, and so they don't need the $46,000 in next year's budget. So my suggestion to the budget committee is that you delete that from your recommended budget.
Which I'm sure we will, but we're just grandstanding at the moment, so,
Okay.
so bear with us.
no, I wouldn't say grandstand, I think you've got a good point, that you've taken, the decision has been taken away from the taxpayers. And they're the ones that should be making this decision.
Do you wanna make a motion, Selectman Grenier? Move it along?
You know, I understand your concern, but again, when we have a vote, it may not be transparent in the sense that it's not on the warrant article in March. But we do this stuff in an open public meeting, and at the time, we feel it's in the best interest of the town, particularly the fire department, to get the radios. The fire vote's already been voted on, this is just a police payment.
And I would just add that it's perfectly legal, there's nothing the selectmen have done illegally.
I didn't say anything to the
Just wanna
contrary
say
of that,
that for
Scott.
the
I really didn't. It's more of a process and procedure type annoyance than anything else.
I understand, and we don't know what we're gonna have left at the end of the year. And we chose to do these two articles and vote on them, so.
So, that brings us to the warrant articles. First warrant article for the budget committee to reconsider is Article 2. And you'll notice that the current figure in there is $13,712,117, which was previously voted by the budget committee on a 7-2 vote. However, the selectmen have reduced their recommendation by $54,216. And so I would suggest to the budget committee that you reduce your budget by $54,216, and that you would vote on a figure of $13,657,901.
So it's $13,656,901.
That's what's in there.
$13,657,901.
That's what it says, recommended by the Board of Selectmen.
And so the difference
Ah,
between
okay.
the budget committee's number and the selectmen's number is the $54,216 for the fireboat lease. So anytime somebody wants to make a motion and vote on it, we can move on to Article 3.
Okay, I will entertain a motion then for the $13,657,901 as recommended by the Board of Selectmen.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom. Any further discussion?
You keep staring at me, Sean.
And hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
And then I would just note for the record that the selectmen also reduced the default budget by $54,216, so that number has dropped from previous numbers as well. Because there won't be a need in the default budget for money for fireboat lease payment, because they've encumbered the money from 2018. So next up is Article 3, which is brand new for the budget committee tonight. It calls for an appropriation of $17,269, and that is to fund the first year of a collective bargaining agreement with the Teamsters. And so we've estimated the cost in the second year to be 2.5% more than that, which is $17,700. I've also provided you tonight with a complete list in your package of the amendments to the collective bargaining agreement. if anybody wanted, I could have produced the whole, document, which is about 40 pages. But I thought, in the interest of being concise, I would give you the information that the selectmen voted on by way of changes from the current collective bargaining agreement to a new collective bargaining agreement.
How many people are in there?
There are 14 positions covered in this bargaining.
So is this currently still in negotiation?
No, it's been ratified by the union, it's been ratified by the Board of Selectmen, and now the warrant article goes to the voters.
What is the summary for the health insurance, item 14.1 in the handout?
So essentially, there have been, no changes in the, no substantial changes in the health insurance coverage. Last year, when we made a switch we eliminated, the more expensive policy, and as part of the contract, the selectmen shared some of that savings with the employees. So that's over and done with, so there was language in the current contract on how that sharing worked, and all of that's being stricken from the next contract. So the town continues to pay 90% of the premiums, employees pay 10% of the premiums. The only real change, other than eliminating those buyout provisions that are no longer applicable, was a little bit of a tightening on the opt-out policy for employees who may be married and both work for the town.
Any further questions?
Well,
Right,
the
maybe
biggest
there's a-
change in the current contract as opposed to the previous contract is the starting pay for a police officer has increased by $2 an hour.
And how much of the 17,269 is driving that?
Essentially, all of that is for those wage increases.
Okay, and it's only on new hires?
Well, it's for the starting pay of a new hire, so as a result of that starting pay increased by $2 an hour, we have a number of employees who've been here 3 or 4 years who would be below that rate, so those pays are being adjusted as well. And you'll see there's an appendix, I think it's Appendix A, that shows how we've attempted to address that. Actually, it's Appendix B. And every one of those was done on a case-by-case basis, those adjustments, looking at the impact of that $2 an hour starting rate increase. And as you might imagine, through the process of negotiations, the town started by providing a very small number, and the union started by asking for a very large number, and what you see is the agreement we came to as the process evolved.
Chris?
Appendix B, Scott, the reduction in cost of the SRO in the vacant position, is that the difference between the departing one and what you're gonna be able to hire the new one for?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So we had an employee with 13 years of experience leaving. We're gonna replace that presumably with somebody coming in with no experience, and that $24,450 savings, kept that figure of 17,269. It would have been $24,000 higher but for that change in staffing.
Tracy?
Do I recall correctly when we met, I think it was November, filling that position hasn't been successful the last 2 years anyways, so.
Correct, and so that's what we hope the $2 an hour starting pay increase will help us fill those positions. We're going to have, right now, today, we have 2 open patrol officer positions, 1 open dispatch position, and I envision we'll have another patrol officer opening in a couple weeks.
So we're down 3 officers.
We'll be hiring 3 officers and a dispatcher.
Tim?
This is for a 3-year period, this contract?
2 years.
And are there any additional vacation day
No,
awards?
no,
Same vacation
no
day?
changes.
Do we have an idea, does the union, I don't know, does the union negotiate with us separately and then Laconia does the same thing in the same year and Gilmanton and whatever, do we have a sense for how everyone else made out?
Gilmanton's not unionized. Laconia is, I don't know, they're independent of us.
So in terms of comparing our newly negotiated wage schedule with other surrounding communities, obviously a $2 increase makes us much more competitive, but we're still nowhere near the top of the labor market in that pay scale.
As an indicator, Laconia last hiring process had 41 applications, we had 5. Notwithstanding the one that went to the academy and had a problem.
Just a tad.
Oh, you have to rub it in.
I'm not rubbing it in.
What is the starting, the new starting wage gonna be?
$21.14 an hour.
21.14?
So it's essentially a 10% raise at the base.
You have $2 from 1914 to, yeah, a
10%.
little over 2%.
That's for the police officer, but
2%.
communications, it's 1741.
Right, $2 there too.
He meant to say $2, not 2%.
Okay, yeah, so it's a 10% raise.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anything else? I will entertain a motion then, or do I have to read the article?
You don't have to read it, it is in the phone.
I will entertain a motion then.
I make a motion that we accept Article 3.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tracy. Any further discussion? In hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hands. All those opposed? Unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Article 4. Article 4 has been amended since the Budget Committee last discussed this. The Budget Committee requested the sentence be added, which has been added, which reads, "This is the first year of a 3-year project with a total estimated cost of $225,000. So the budget figure of $125,000 hasn't changed, but the Budget Committee had not yet voted on this article because you wanted that language added.
Any discussions, questions?
Skip, we won't be using unfunded balance, just so you know, I think I can tell you that ahead of time.
Actually, we are using fund balance.
Yeah, it's right there in the article. Sorry, Rags.
But it's what I do best.
Good try, thinking that I didn't read it. But that does bring up, again, I'm just gonna ask, this is the first year of a 3-year project with a total estimated cost of $225K. So basically, you're front-loading it in the first year, correct? Yeah. Okay. So the roughly speaking, order of magnitude, the second half will be split in the last 2 years.
It's not an even split, but it's
But-
broken out in the CIP, so you can see what those numbers are.
Right, but basically,
Yep.
effectively, okay.
Anything else? In hearing none, I will, oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
No, don't be sorry.
fund balance, so you're expecting that there will be funds still in the fund balance for the next 2 years?
Yes, as we sit here today, we talked about this once before, I think there's $4.6 million in fund balance.
Right, yeah, you never know, I just wanted to make clear.
Anything else?
It's a little more stable than the stock exchange.
I make a motion to
Sorry.
approve Article 4 as written.
Is there a second?
I second that.
No. Give it to Peter. Any further discussion? In hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, the ayes have it.
And thank you for adding in that extra line.
Not a problem.
Okay, same story in Article 5. When the Budget Committee last discussed it, there was a request to add additional information to the language of the warrant article, which has been done. It's the last sentence that reads, "This is the first year of a 4-year project with a total estimated cost of $45,000. So, that being the case, there's a need now for the Budget Committee to vote yes or no.
Any questions or discussion?
I don't have any questions, but I have some information to impart. I'm not crazy about this, columbarium, because I don't think we need it. I think there's little to no need for this, and I've done a lot of research. It turns out that, the cemeteries in Laconia, Sacred Heart and St. Lambert's do not have columbariums. I've talked with the person in charge at Bayside, which is near Shaw's. They do have one, and it was built 12 years ago, and there are 48 units, and they have sold 10 in that period of time. I've talked with the Methodist Church here. They do have one. They have 50 units with a possible 50 more if they would like to have them. That unit was built in 2015. They have sold 3, and they have sold 1 this year. It would appear that there really isn't a lot of interest in this when you stop and think that the churches, the Methodist Church and the Community Church, both have their own places to deposit cremated remains. And if you're a member of the church, and in the case of the Methodist Church, if you're a member of that church and you live at Wesley Woods, you have the opportunity to avail yourself of their units there. I think there's just really no need of this. There's been some effort made to perhaps have the Liberty Hill cleanup site used as another cemetery down the road, and that would seem to be in order if that can be accomplished. And if you really stop and think about it, many times remains are cast to the wind. They never are buried or deposited anywhere. So I really think that this is kind of the cart before the horse. We're paying for this up front, and it takes obviously a long time for the payback on it, and that's one of the deterrents. And it kind of smacks of the Lakes Business Park layout, where we are paying and paying and paying, and the lots in that area have not been sold. So I would like to, I'd like to not see this happen. I think it's premature and unnecessary. Anyone else have a comment?
I very much agree with that. It's well said. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, me
Chris?
too.
Thank you for doing that research. I do recall asking the trustees to come back and make a case for this with some information, and they're obviously not passionate enough about it to come and make a case.
Well, I missed that meeting, unfortunately, or I would have spoken up or had more information to give at that meeting, but unfortunately I wasn't here.
But we asked some of those questions that you answered better than they did.
And what?
That you have answered better than they could.
Oh, okay. Well, I feel strongly about it, so I spent some time contacting people and asking, hopefully, the right questions, so that we can turn this down. I just don't see a need for it.
So what the Budget Committee needs to do is recommend a dollar figure, and that can be 0 if you're so inclined.
I would make a motion to have the dollar figure be 0.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Second by Skip. Any further discussion?
Yeah, how's that work?
So does this stay on the warrant?
So it'll be on the warrant with a recommendation of the Budget Committee, depending on how the vote goes, it will probably say not recommended by the Budget Committee.
But the
we'll
figure
go
is 0.
zero.
Does the 45,000 go to 0?
Well, the budget item is $10,000. So that's what the voters will be voting on.
Yeah, but we can't say.
So you can recommend zero, but the voters are gonna vote on $10,000, yes or no.
So how do we rearrange that?
So you vote zero, and it will say not recommended by the budget committee.
But we don't vote, we don't put a dollar, we don't change the wording of it. No. We
No.
just vote yes or no.
You're voting on the budget.
Okay.
I understand.
So, and carrying this one step further, it's in the CIP for a total, I believe, of $45,000 or $55,000. How is that affected? What?
This
How does
actually
that
doesn't rise to the level of being in the CIP,
Mm-hmm.
so it's just a warrant article that goes to the voters.
But it still remains in the CIP.
No, it still remains as a warrant article that goes to the voters, it's not in the CIP. So if the voters approve it, $10,000 will be appropriated.
Okay, I thought I
If the
saw it
voters
in the
don't approve
CIP.
it, then nothing will be appropriated.
And if we change that dollar amount to zero,
That would have to be,
If you're inclined to do that, that's something you would do at the deliberative session.
Yeah.
I thought the new law said that you really can't change the intent. I don't know if we can change that.
Going from 10,000 to zero is not changing the intent.
Okay.
So for tonight, you're just voting on, there's a $10,000 item in the budget. And you're gonna vote to either recommend that $10,000, or not recommend the $10,000, or do something else.
Selectman Greg.
Let me throw out option 2. If I get the other 2 selectmen to revisit this, can we remove the entire article
Selectmen can do that right up till the time they sign the warrant.
till the 20th,
Yeah, when, I think the warrant has to
the
be
deadline?
posted on this.
So it's not even on the warrant at all?
This is just a draft warrant right now.
Okay, so theoretically, if I can convince one of my brother selectmen to vote no,
It would come off the warrant.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for doing that research.
Thank you,
Yes.
Sue.
You're welcome.
So in the interim, we still need to vote.
Vote on it.
On a number.
I will entertain a motion. Skip.
I would like to make a motion that the budget committee asks that the selectmen withdraw this from the warrant.
Is there a second?
There was
in
already a
this-
motion on the floor.
Oh,
Yeah,
Oh, there's a motion for the zero, that's right. So
Yeah.
would you like to
a motion.
withdraw
So
your
I think you
motion?
can deal with those two issues separately.
Yeah.
They're two separate things, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah.
Just a motion.
All right, let's finish with yours first then.
Okay, so, my motion is to remove the $10,000,
No,
What-
to
what
not
motion is
recommend.
on the
to not
floor?
recommend, okay?
For zero.
Who made that motion?
Sue.
Sue.
And it was seconded by Skip to put a $0 figure in.
Okay,
But we can't
But
do
we
that.
can't do that.
No, we can,
Yes, you're voting on the $10,000 budget.
Yeah.
So if you're voting zero, I'll take it from there.
Make a motion to vote on the budget. That's what we did,
Well, I
right?
think she did, yeah, to
Yeah,
zero.
the zero.
Yep.
Okay, any further discussion? In hearing none, all those in favor of Sue's motion signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
so effectively recommended by the budget committee by a vote of 0 to 10.
So what it's gonna say is not
No.
recommended by the
Yeah.
budget committee by
Be
a
one-
vote of 10 to
I
1.
voted no because we
Right.
voted
It
otherwise.
should be 11 to 1.
11.
11
Oh, Tim's here now,
not,
yep.
not
Yep.
recommended.
Not recommended by the
Not
budget.
recommended.
That's what it's gonna say, not
By 11
recommended by
to
the budget
1.
committee.
Now,
okay, so now,
Skip.
Yes. I would like to make a motion that the budget committee urge the selectmen to withdraw this warrant, this article from the warrant.
Is there a second?
Can we make a motion regarding a non-money?
Yeah, you're just asking the selectmen whether
Yeah,
they agree on it.
just like we did with
Okay.
asking them to change the
Yeah.
lines,
that's
the
fine.
amounts. I mean, they can do it, they can just tell us to pound sand too.
Seconded by Mr. Karagianis. Any further discussion? In hearing none, all those in favor of Skip's motion?
Oh, nope,
Sorry, Rex.
Unfortunately, the other 2 selectmen aren't here to defend themselves, cause initially I voted no on this because I felt it was ill-timed, enough research hadn't been done, they've talked about land for years and never did anything about it, now they wanna columbarium. And I felt more research needed to be done. Somewhere along the way, it says 3-0, somebody twisted my arm, I don't know if it was Angela or Scott, but.
Voted Monday night.
Yeah, I know. And you gave me a reason for
And
going
I
out.
told you how you could get out of
Yes, I
that.
know. I'm doing that tonight. But anyway, that's how we got to where we are, but I'm gonna abstain from this vote for obvious reasons.
Well, actually, you voted against it.
Well, no, the motion.
Oh, this one.
Skip
Yeah.
this. Yes. Okay, any further discussion? And hearing none, all those in favor of Skip's motion signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it.
Okay, one last bite at this apple. I'm gonna recommend once again that you delete $46,000 from your budget for the fire radio system improvement.
What number?
That was Article.
There's no article, because the article's been withdrawn.
Oh.
But right now, you still have $46,000 in your recommended budget that doesn't need to
How do
be.
we word that?
So just, recommend deleting the $46,000 for
I
fire
make a
radio
motion to
system
delete
improvement.
$46,000 from the budget.
Is there a
Second.
Seconded by Jack, actually. Any further discussion? And seeing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
So that concludes, everything that I had new, unless the budget committee decides to revisit any of the other warrant articles. If you don't, then my work here is done.
And
We haven't yet received any petitions,
okay,
so you'll be discussing those at the public hearing for the
Yep.
first time, and then at the conclusion of the public hearing, you'll be voting on those recommendations. And, because of all of that taking place after the hearing, we will not be able to give you a MS 737 to sign on that night, but you'll take all your votes, and then we'll have it ready, and then you can just come by here and sign it.
So those are the ones that are in italics that you,
Correct.
okay, thank
Those are what I expect to see, but I've
oh,
not yet.
Scott?
I would like to revisit the recycle, after having thought about it, considerably, I'd like to reconsider that.
Which article?
Article 8.
Make a motion.
Make a motion, Tom.
Okay, I make a motion that we revisit Article 8.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I think, after thinking about it for a considerable amount of time, I think we really should discuss what's best for the town, not what happened last year, but how this will affect the town this year. And is it the right thing to do for the town? And I just think that should be discussed, is it doing this the right thing for the town in the future? And I think 5 years down the road, we will consider that it was the right thing to do, my opinion.
Any further discussion? Mr. McDonald?
I feel that the way the selectmen handled that was not the best interest of the town. I left that night furious
I
that they
understand.
started a project that they knew they couldn't finish, and now sticking the taxpayers with a $400,000 bill. So I wanna send a message that is crap, and we're not gonna allow that to happen in our town again.
I understand your point
Alright?
too, I do
When you
understand
do a
what you're
project, when you
saying,
do a
but-
project, you get a budget, you raise the money for the budget so you can complete it, and then you break ground. You don't break ground on a project knowing that you don't have enough money.
But down the road,
It's
not
ridiculous.
finishing it, what's it gonna mean? That's all I'm asking. I
This
think it should
happened-
be
this
As
discussed.
far as I'm
the
concerned, it
police.
could sit there and rust for a couple of years, and we don't think about it.
I don't-
That's how I feel about
I
it.
don't, yeah, I understand, but I don't think it's in the best interest of the town to let it rust for a couple of years.
Well, there's two parts to that. I agree with Chris, that it should have been done and done right in the first place. But given the crash in the recyclable marketplace, there's no real market there for the most part, based on what was the ROI on that to begin with. And when we discussed this, Scott kept saying, well, I just came from a meeting. Well, there is a marketplace, but when I pressed him on what the ROI would be, what's the size of that market, we couldn't get an answer. So going forward, unless we have some really hard numbers, you can't say one way or the other whether it's good for the town in 5 years, 4 years, 10 years, or what have you. And I can't see spending money, I mean, this is you know, $1.5 million round numbers. How much is it costing us now just to go to the landfill? How many years would that $1.5 million cover that's gone now?
I just don't think we should plan forever to go to landfill, but that's my opinion.
When we approached the town for the $950,000, the solid waste committee believed we could do it for that amount. Municipalities can't do business the way a private business can. And yeah, we get stiffed at the end of this thing, but I still think it's the way to go. And there is a market out there. I mean, recently the Pittsfield Consortium that does 4 towns, they're doing exactly what we are doing now. And they say there's a market for it. They just had a big article in the Union Leader about it, and they love what they're doing. And it's exactly what we're gonna do. Every town we visited as a committee that's recycling and separating stuff and baling it has had a market for it.
So what are the numbers? Nobody's giving us good numbers.
Well, I mean, it's a market that fluctuates great, but to simply say, Skip, as you have said, there's no market for it, that's just not a true statement. There's a market.
There's
but
no
it
market for
fluctuates
single stream,
widely.
period.
Well,
But aren't these things scalable? It's unclear to me why, you know, joining up with Laconia and staying there, they didn't say we couldn't dump any trash there anymore, right?
No, but the problem is they're not looking towards the future. They're not making any change in plans, and ultimately, when they get behind the 8 ball and have to, we gotta pay for that. We've recently completed all our payments to them for all the improvements they've done to the place, so we're not obligated. So, if they ultimately decide to make some type of recycling change, we're tied to that, and we're gonna pay for that too. What was our last portion that we paid them for improvements?
I don't know the
We
exact
paid them for
figure. It was
several years
hundred
though.
thousand.
Yeah, several $100,000.
Peter?
Are we on a contract with Laconia, or a multi-year contract, or is it year by year? What if we postpone this for a year? Are we tied into a longer-term deal with Laconia?
No,
It's 1 year at a time.
no, now that we've paid the thing, I think, what's our obligation
We
now?
can walk
Scott?
away.
Yeah, now that we've paid our last payment, which was what, 3 years ago?
Year or so.
Yeah, it was that soon.
Skip.
I thought about this today because I figured it was gonna be brought back up again. And the one thing that did come back to me was a discussion a number of years ago on one of the social services organizations, the NGOs, the charities. And I remember that Ms. Weeks was all for spending $50,000. And I said, well, for what? And, you know, can you break it down? We spend so much time walking through all of these GL account numbers to make sure that they're correct. And I couldn't get an answer from her other than, well, it'll be helpful to you later on because we all need medical care in the future, which I thought was a horrible answer. And it's just saying, okay, $50,000 up in the air. I may be a hard nose about the numbers, but I'm trying to do it for the right way. I want to make sure that we're not going to throw bad money after not exactly great money so far. So just to be able to say, you know, in the future we'll need it, well, then prove it to me. Give me the numbers, let's set it out, just like we do with everything else, and then convince me that way. But until that happens, I am not convinced, and I'm gonna keep to a no answer on this.
Chris?
To me, this vote is not a referendum on the validity of the recycling center. This is about how the process was handled, and the need to come back and ask the taxpayers for $400,000 more money. I firmly believe that if that doesn't get voted in, which it probably will anyway, that they'll still finish the project with the $4.6 million in fund balance. My point is, when you put a project out to bid, particularly with public funds, you do it with a legitimate contractor that's gonna give you a not to exceed number, and then you go and you procure that money, and then you start the project. You don't just get a budget and listen to a subcommittee tell you you can build it for 9, hire somebody at time and material, I guess, and just say, go ahead and start it.
We
Oh.
did hire somebody, they said 1.7 million.
how much money do you have? 900,000.
Yeah.
So you start the project.
Yep, because,
You knew you couldn't finish it.
we
How-
believe
how-
we could have.
What if we built a school with half the money and we got halfway done? Came back to the taxpayer and said, I'm sorry, we can't finish this school, we're gonna need another $1 million. I mean, you can't operate that way.
Well said. Tim?
Some of us have been through this before. I agree with Chris. You know, this is the building here that is the legacy fiasco. 38 years ago, we passed a $7 million bond to build this building. There was a site study. Oh, well, yeah, it's a good site, well, no problem, we're gonna put it up. The first thing they found out was there was all this ledge, the size of these Volkswagen-sized boulders over there in the brook. They couldn't connect up the septic system with the existing DPW septic system. Up went the cost. I mean, by the time we went down the road 3 years later, we had spent about $11.5 to $12 million to build this building. And it seems like within 2 or 3, 5 years, the police were telling us the new police station wasn't any good anymore and they needed another new police station. In the meantime, you know, we had portable classrooms spread out like cities all over our schools here. And there was such a bitter animosity among the voters about the fiasco that went around with the building of this building and the tremendous cost overruns, and then we find out later that, you know, it was moisture problems, there was problems with the flow and metering and the heating and air conditioning, and on it goes, and more mitigation, more costs. This recycling center, when we first proposed it, there was no proposal to put in any septic system or heated bathrooms, or that was all added, as I understand it, after we had come up with this $950,000 figure. But you know, I'm afraid of this thing in terms of how I know how bitter the taxpayers were, and we had three, I think, middle school bonds were turned down after this building was built. The fire station, they decided, no, we're not gonna build a new fire station, we're gonna retrofit it instead. I think that's worked out fine. But I'm just afraid that taxpayers are going to be, you know, having that same sense of legacy issue where they don't trust you. They say, well, you know, how do we know this next thing, that if we move the DPW across the street and have to spend $25 million for a new DPW facility, how do we know we'll get that through, even if it's needed? This is the kind of thing that to me, I'm still bitter about this town hall and the way it went through. And you know, we all know who it was. It was the people working, the public employees, the good old boys in town, the little community center, charming little town hall and police station just weren't adequate enough for our growing town. But I mean, if they had just come out and said we're going to need $12 million and we got a lot of issues there with that site, fine. But somebody was paid to do the site study for this building, and in my mind, they blew it. They blew it big time. And so, and now we just talked about again the industrial park. That was another one. You know, we're going to have manufacturing jobs for our children there. Never happened. You know, another issue I have with this facility, you know, I don't imagine how many public buildings these days are being put up without some kind of a solar rooftop unit to provide some of the energy cost abatement. And there's no plan for any solar unit here, or even like a what we would call expansion plan, or I guess we could do it later, but it doesn't seem like it's all that energy efficient as designed and as proposed. So those are some of my thoughts.
Jack?
So, I don't know the history of this as much as Chris and Tim do, but just looking at it on the surface, and visiting there, cause I don't hire a trash service, I go there. It seems to me that there must be some positive operating leverage in this business. You know, it's a scale business. Waste Management runs that very efficiently. It's hard for me to believe that a small town like Guilford can do it more cost effectively with public employees than the combination of Guilford and Laconia, and having Waste Management, a national, highly expert waste management company, can do it. So I'd rather take my chances that they end up coming around to not doing single stream, and we have to do the same thing we're proposing to do, and that the rate increase still will leave us at less risk than if we go down this road in a very changing, waste cycle, waste economic cycle, that we won't end up having to cost just a lot more than Waste Management can do it, and we can participate in a bigger scale.
Yep.
I would like to move the question and just let the voters decide on it. I make a motion that we,
Well, we don't, I mean, do we have to?
right now you're at 0. So unless there's a decision to change from 0, you don't need to do
Then
it.
we've already
voted not to
You
recommend.
can vote not to recommend it, so.
I think one of the,
I would like to do
at
both.
that meeting, Mr. Grenier was not there, and now he is, which I think is helpful.
Can we make a motion to revote? Have a revote?
You can if you want.
Yeah.
Make a motion that we had take another vote on Article 8.
Is there a
I'll
second?
second that.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor signify by raising your hand.
What are we, we're voting,
Voting on-
Just to get another
Just to
vote.
get another
Just to
vote.
get
Voting on the vote.
Okay, so voting on whether to vote.
Typical government operation. All those in favor signify by raising your hand.
Now, let's be clear, you're voting to recommend or not to?
No, just to
recommend?
vote.
Just to
Just to
revote.
vote.
as
Just
to
another
the-
vote.
Yeah.
Just to vote to have another vote.
Yeah.
All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Or, what,
I was a no.
6 to 5.
6 to 5? No.
No, there's
12
All those, let's redo this. All those in favor signify by raising your hand.
And that is of having a revote.
Yeah.
Yes.
7. Okay, it'd be 7 to 5. The ayes
No.
have it.
5, that's 13.
7 to
Oh, I'm sorry, you said 8, I'm sorry.
7 to 5.
My apologies.
7 to 5 to have another
I thought you said
vote.
8, sorry,
To have a
I'm sorry.
revote.
Okay,
I know. All the
Pick a
numbers.
number.
Now-
so now
we will vote
have a
on-
revote on this article.
Now I make a motion that we vote on Article 8.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Tom.
When you
Any
say vote on Article 8, does that mean vote to recommend Article 8?
Are you voting to
Yes.
recommend
Voting
Article
to
8 as
recommend.
written?
Vote to recommend $400,000, because
You
you're
vote-
voting on the budget number.
No, he's voting on to recommend Article 8 as written,
Yes.
which is the $400,000.
Yes.
Seconded by Tom. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Tracy.
I don't know a lot about this, so I apologize. What's gonna happen to that center that's already started if we don't do it?
We're not gonna finish it.
You just won't finish it, just
Nope.
done, just sit there and rust, as we said, okay?
Yep.
That's what I wanted to know, thank you.
Well,
Well,
Jack?
in all likelihood, they'll find a use for it. They won't just rust.
Okay,
It'll be there in the wings if, down the road, there's greater visibility on it being economically the best case for Guilford. So you have some sightline or 5 to 10 years, which I don't think we have right now. And as Chris said, it's entirely at the discretion of the selectmen. There's enough money, they could finish it right out of the general fund.
Well, if the people vote down to 400,000, I believe in the will of the people, and I won't certainly be advocating fund balance for that.
I have a hard time throwing more money into this project.
So there's a motion on the
There's a
floor.
motion on the floor
And there's a second.
for Article 8 as written. Is all those, any further discussion? And hearing none, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? 8-4, and opposed.
Well,
No,
it's
four.
not recommended, oh, not.
Not recommended 8-4.
There we go. Does that add up, Angela?
That does, sorry.
I believe that is it, Mr.
Any
Dunn.
other town business?
We are all set.
Wait just 1 minute.
Go ahead, Sue.
Under patriotic purposes, the candlelight stroll, can we revisit that?
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's part of the budget,
Right,
which you voted 11 to nothing in favor of.
So I missed my opportunity, okay.
well, we can vote to reopen it, and I would like to make that motion.
Motion's on the floor. Is there a second? Sue? Well, do you second it? Do you second the motion?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. The candlelight stroll is $750 for that.
No, candlelight stroll is in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, this motion is. Yeah, we have to vote.
First is the motion to reconsider, so we have to vote
I-
whether we're going to or not.
To
Any,
reconsider.
all those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? Jim, are you up or down?
I already voted
Okay. 1, 2, 3.
the other way.
Do our hands go?
I got 6-6.
Six.
So it passes.
No, it fails.
No,
Fails.
it fails.
Fail.
Tie means a fail.
That means fail. Sorry, Sue.
Everybody happy?
Of course not.
Thank you.
And I will now turn the floor over to the school and Mr. Byford.
Doing warrant articles, correct?
Correct.
Everybody have the warrant articles that I handed out, a couple weeks ago?
There you go, they're right here, here you go.
Here you go, they come around.
Got him.
Thank you.
Excellent. Here.
Problem.
This is the rewording.
Just rewording, yeah.
The
It's
rewording.
just a rewording, but we will have to vote on it because it has been reworded.
Yep.
Okay.
Cheers, Scott.
No discussion on that.
So the first warrant article, the athletic track resurfacing, there was no rewording, the budget committee had voted to recommend 12-0. Okay,
Well, I thought there was rewording on that
not
one.
on the athletic track resurfacing.
So we don't have to.
Because it's a
respond.
one-shot deal,
It's a
rather
one-shot
than
deal.
multi-year.
Yep,
So this one, we don't have to, we don't have.
No.
We don't have to change, right, unless
Sounds
we
like
want
we-
to.
choosing to do some of that, but you don't have to, no.
Okay.
Next warrant article is World Language Program. You asked that we try to be more clear, the school board try to be more clear about that this is going to be an ongoing annual appropriation and part of the operating budget going forward to be funded from general taxation. That last line was reworded and added some words to hopefully draw more clarity for the voters when they read that.
Tracy,
I'll just make a motion.
go ahead.
All right, I make a motion to accept the proposed warrant articles for the World Language Program as reworded here.
Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Joe. Any discussion?
What was our vote last time? I can't remember.
Three and
I think
three
it was
against.
9-3.
9-3. Yes.
World Language Program, is there any way that we can continue on with the same format that we have with the after-school program or whatever it was, rather than hiring another teacher for $89,000?
Isn't that funded by?
It has been funded by the PTA, the last year and this year. The school board has decided to put this out as a warrant article and to have world language K through 12 in our school system.
Peter?
The cost, what was the cost of the after-school program that the PTA funded?
per year? $3,600 per year.
So we did the job for $3,600.
No, that was only
No,
a couple,
that was
it
after
was only a
school.
couple
That
of
was after school.
students.
It was after
Not that
school,
many
it was
kids.
not the entire student body, it was a sign up. I wanna say 20 students per grade level, is that right?
It was just, 40 students total.
So it didn't address the middle school level.
And it was maxed out.
Middle school already.
Sold out every
Sold
time.
out.
Yes.
Eighth grade has one.
Only has eighth grade.
Eighth grade only has, didn't address 5 through 7.
And waiting list to get in.
I didn't hear.
There's a waiting list to get in, they max it out with the waiting list.
Any further discussion?
What, you said doesn't, the teacher that's there now, is it one teacher or two teachers in the middle school?
There's one teacher currently in the middle school for, world language.
Okay. And that person teaches what languages?
They teach, that person teaches French and Spanish, and it's in their 8th grade year right now.
Only in their 8th grade year, so
Correct.
you cut the 7th grade year out, because when my kids went through, they were doing 7th and 8th.
It's 8th grade only right now.
So the one teacher does
French and Spanish, and 8th grade only.
for all kids, for all the students in 8th grade?
All
grade.
8th
All
graders,
eighth grade.
all
All
8th grade graders.
Okay,
And
it's
they-
mandatory that they take
Yes.
French and Spanish.
And this is for K through 7.
Yes.
Any further discussion? And Chris?
I'd be a little wary of the message that we would be sending to the PTA, and I can't speak for the PTA as to their willingness to continue on, but they entered into the agreement under the agreement, they agreed basically to fund it for exploratory purposes for these 2 years. So to go back to them and say, well, it'd be a lot cheaper if you guys just kept paying for it, I'd be a little concerned about the message that would be sending to them, and, I know I understand your point, but I don't think that would be well received.
Well, what if the town picked up those costs and relieved the PTA of the $3,600 or even $7,200? I mean, my hesitation here is not that it's a bad thing to have,
The language.
languages
Sure.
and the need for it. But to hire another employee that's gonna be ongoing and benefits, and it's just, when does that stop? When does it slow down, especially when we've had declining enrollments?
Right.
We've had declining enrollments and we add teachers.
Yeah, this isn't an enrollment issue though, this is an offerings issue. What the plan is to take the existing 8th grade and the new position, combine them into a new world language program that starts young and it is contiguous all the way through into high school, so that there are not gaps in it, they're not starting at too late of an age where their absorption isn't as strong. So it's a conscious effort to enhance the academic experience in Guilford. I understand it is adding a position as with our plateaued enrollment, but those are two different issues, I think.
I would disagree. I often write about every social issue has a fiscal cost, so does this. I understand you want to offer as many capabilities as you can, but I disagree with the idea that you can separate the operation versus the enrollment. We're seeing that all over the state, where enrollments, with very few exceptions, are going down. And a lot of towns are saying we cannot continue to afford that level, especially when labor costs do nothing but keep going up and up and up, even as some positions are cut. At some point, you've got to be able to say, we're doing what we can to continue to ask taxpayers to give more and more. I just can't see it. to be honest with you. I was one who voted against it, and I will probably do it again.
Isn't that why it's good that it's a warrant article rather
It
than
is
a
good,
vote
because
for-
everybody will, the whole town will be able to
Right.
vote for it.
Right,
Those that
so
can afford it
they
and those
could
that
have-
can't.
They could have put this in the budget and then we would have had trouble, I mean, at least now people can make this choice.
And that's fine. I don't have a problem with the town folk doing that. But again, as I've said before, there are some in town that they're already at the breaking point. But it'll be up to the town to make that decision.
So right now it's a voluntary program, K through 7. Voluntary where we can offer it to 40 people, right? And 8th grade it becomes mandatory. In 9th, 10th, and 11th, 12th grades, what is
It's a choice.
There's a choice, and they should take 2 years, or they have to take 2 years? Is it required that they take 2 years?
It's not a graduation
It's not a
requirement,
It's not,
no.
okay.
It's not a
It's not a
So-
requirement for graduation.
So it's gonna be required up through 8th grade with this new program and this new deal.
The exposure, they will have exposure through 8th grade now, yes, K through 8th.
Required,
yes.
they're gonna have to take it whether they like it or not.
Right.
So versus a voluntary program that if certain kids that wanted to do that, they could do it after school, or maybe find a time in school that for a lower cost than try to do it for everybody. One size fits all, we're gonna, hire another teacher. I have a problem with that, hiring another teacher. When does it slow down? When does the size of the whole school slow down?
We've researched this, we've done, we've done 2 years of a pilot, we're in our 2nd year of a pilot.
It seems to be going well.
The pilot is going well, it's something that the parents want, something certainly that the PTA is behind. We feel that this is something that we should be offering our students in the school system. And the board was very aware of adding another position to the board, and thus, it's a warrant article. The voters get to choose. Is this something that the voters want to support, or is it something that the voters do not want to support? And the voters will be heard. And that's why it's a warrant article. It's not in our budget, it's proposed as a warrant article.
What parent is gonna say, no, they don't want to have this? Boy, everybody wants to have a language program, and I'm certainly not against it. I just think adding another staff member is costly with all the salary and benefits. It doesn't seem to stop anywhere, especially with the declining enrollment. I just wonder if there isn't a way to fund this the way we did it before, and not have another teacher. Maybe the PTA doesn't pay for it, wouldn't it, maybe it added amount in the budget to cover it so that they don't have to pay for it. A few years ago, we turned down kindergarten resoundingly twice. And the next thing that we know, we have kindergarten in the school as an experiment. Let's see how it goes. Well, we have full-time kindergarten now. When the voters said no, that they didn't want it. And it's a snowball. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, rolling further and further down the hill. I'm not against the language, learning the language.
It's a tough vote for me.
It's
I
hard.
understand it's a tough vote. This is for our future though, this is for the students of this community.
Jack?
I'm sorry, Jack.
This, incremental teacher, is it already in this forecasted?
It is not, no.
It's not, okay,
That-
so because
that
it's a
position
warrant
is not.
article, it's not, this would go up to 1140 then, okay.
I just wanna point out that the enrollment is going up next year, it's not declining,
How do we know the enrollment's going up?
because they gave us this information.
That's the projection.
The
That's
projection
projection.
for next year is
For
an
next year.
increase in enrollment.
And maybe it won't go up next year.
Right.
Maybe
But-
it'll stay stable.
But to say it's declining is also not,
It has for the past 5 or 6 years, and
it
it's
is
been steadily down.
projected to increase next year.
And it has declined in past years.
Many.
Yeah, 198 students, I believe.
Only 68 in the last 5 years. It is
I'm
going up.
not talking about the last 5
It is going
years.
up.
You keep bringing that up.
The projection, you keep bringing it up, so I keep bringing it up, is going up 13 students next year.
There's a limit to how much the taxpayers can pay for services, whether be it the school or the town.
Mantrado Travesura. You know, I just wanna make it clear that, you know, I'm gonna vote on this according to my, sensibility as a member of the budget committee and not on my, personal, feelings for whether or not this is has merit or not. I'll make my decision on that when I go in the voting booth. I just wanna point out that, you know, we've had several votes here on this budget committee where, some of the members have abstained from voting because they felt that they had a conflict of interest. And to me, some of this, issue here, it's almost, as is the fruit of the poisonous tree in terms of how, we have this collective bargaining agreement, which, is in fact the collective bargaining agreement. We have agreed to it, by some measure, one way or the other, we're stuck with it now. Maybe we'll do better in the next round, but, I'm not gonna go any further other than, I think people know what I'm implying when I talk about that collective bargaining agreement and how the taxpayers were represented in that process. It is, you know, we're legally bound to it now, and we just have to deal with these kinds of things as we go forward, as this education industry continues their attack on the taxpayer. You know, it's just one more, round.
One more question.
Go ahead, Jack.
So there's 325 students projected to be in the elementary school, 315 in the middle school. Middle school goes up to grade 8?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna have 640 students will now participate by adding
Well, not
89?
eighth grade,
What's that?
not eighth grade.
Okay, so how many students are gonna participate full-time in this then? It's gonna be 500?
Yeah, eighth grade will still
Yeah,
participate
so
as well,
they would
so
still be
it'll be over
So it's not
600
addition.
students.
Okay, so the additional students are gonna be this 325, is that the way to think about it?
little more.
And the fifth, sixth, and seventh grade students.
So what is that number?
So the total number of students you have at the elementary school is
240 kids.
so 343 and 3.
243, 527, about.
So we're talking 565?
Additional students.
565 additional students will have mandatory language class every trimester for 89,000. Is that kind of the way to think about it?
Something like that, yes. Yep.
Okay. That's a better value than bass fishing in my opinion.
Any further discussion? And hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? 9-3.
The next warrant article is school buildings maintenance capital reserve fund. The budget committee had asked that I take back to the school board a recommendation to put that last line in parentheses. The next intended project is the renovation of the 1974 Guilford High School locker room project for the cost of $870,000 in the 22-23. The current balance is $150,000.
Is there a motion on the floor?
I make a motion that we accept the changes made.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Selectman Grenier. Any discussion? And hearing none. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
On the backside, school buildings roof maintenance capital reserve fund. Again, the budget committee had asked that I take back to the school board the wording that's in parentheses. The next intended project is the Guilford Elementary and High School roofing projects for the cost of $800,000 in 23-24 and 24-25. The current balance is $125,000.
Is there a motion on the floor?
Make a motion to accept the school buildings roof maintenance capital reserve fund as rewritten.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Kristen. Although, as any discussion? And hearing none. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? The ayes have it.
Last proposed warrant article, the school buildings technology infrastructure capital reserve fund. Again, I took back to the school board the request from the budget committee. In parentheses there, the next intended project is the Guilford School District wireless infrastructure project for the cost of $182,000 in 21-22. The current balance is $60,000.
Is there a motion to?
I move to, vote on the revised version of this warrant article.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Joe. Any discussions?
What was the previous vote on this?
It was what?
I think it was 11-1,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe.
I know there's one person against it, I just couldn't remember.
Yeah, well, same thing as before. I think this kind of thing, you know, on a 20% swap out every single year should have been included in the operating budget instead of doing it this way. The numbers aren't that large to really require a special fund. So, yes, I will be the one.
Any further discussion? And hearing none. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? Skip, you got company.
Oh, really?
I agree, it should have been in the budget. Not opposed to the amount of, yeah, it was just
Okay. Anything else, Skip?
methodology.
I don't have anything else, that's it.
Okay. Just the last few things before the public hearing next Thursday. For Mr. Karagianis, Mr. Sullivan, and myself, the filing deadline for this coming year starts on the 23rd of January and ends at 5 o'clock on the 1st of February. Tom, did you have anything?
Filing deadline for what?
For
Re-upping.
re-upping.
Oh,
And the last, just a question before we go to the public hearing. How would the budget committee like to do this for this year? Would they be more comfortable up on the stage or in the lecture hall as before?
I've only seen.
I mean,
We
Sue,
should-
you and I started when we were in the lecture hall.
Yeah, I don't mind the lecture hall. Doesn't make any difference either way, I guess. Lecture hall's okay.
I guess I'm not following along here.
Well, part of the thing is,
Small event.
it's,
Oh,
Setting up the stage?
Yeah,
for
set
that,
up the
cost
stage.
and stuff?
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, let's,
easier in a smaller area.
yeah, let's do the lecture hall, then
Yeah.
that's crazy to be on the stage. It's a lot of extra effort.
Angela, I'm thinking of you.
well,
What's that?
I'm thinking of you.
Yeah, I mean, I already made the arrangements with the school, but I can contact them to see if a switch can be made.
well, it always kind of depends. Do we have something that will attract a ton of people to come? I've seen the auditorium almost empty, and I've seen it overflowing. So what year is it gonna be this year?
Yeah, that's the,
Wow.
I mean, I think the lecture hall, to me,
How many, I don't think I've ever been in it. How many people does it hold?
10,
60.
60?
Tim, how many people does
Sure we
lecture
have it.
hall?
The lecture hall is just where they
Lecture
pull
hall,
the
Back
thing
of the stage.
across.
Back of
The
the auditorium.
500, there's 500 would fit in the front section of the auditorium, and the lecture hall's in the back,
Oh, okay.
fit 250, 125.
So it's just the back
Yeah.
half.
Just the
of
back
building.
half,
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was another
Yeah.
room.
John, historically, you've had it in the back.
Yep.
The reason why it was moved to the front is, that was because you've done the school and town together. In the past, you do a school different day, the town this day.
true.
So we had it in the back, so you anticipated possibly to have a bigger crowd by doing it the same day. So the building's open, it's available, so if you just wanna have it in a smaller area, you can. But that was the reason why I put it on the stage.
Jack?
So just some incremental comment on these warrant articles. So it's come up a number of times. This is my first year doing it, but that, you know, these things would be better off embedded into the overall budget for transparency of what it actually costs year to year to fund a department or a service in the town. And the pushback has been that, it kind of messes up the default budget, or that this gives the town an individual line item strike for the budget. But these things generally always pass, and the biggest problem is it's very hard for the voting populace to really see the true cost on a percentage increase year to year that these departments and services cost, because the warrant articles are large in relation to the spending in many cases. So I think it's poor practice to do it this way. There can be a way to call it out specially, or if it's the feeling of the town that they're doing their moral, best by having an individual transparent vote, these numbers need to be rolled into the budget for the townspeople, in my view. Because it looks like things are going up 3% a year or 2% a year, and they're not. They're going up 7, 8, 9% a year. And compared to what everyone else's, raises are in this town, if you look at the demographic, it's nowhere near that. So that's my
Well,
editorial for as we move to
I
the
just
close.
respond to that, and I made this same comment last year. Our problem is labor costs. And, what people don't seem to realize, okay, that was just a 10% increase for police officers who made less than $10 an hour. But, up until recently, we've been having this wage decompression, and it's even more exacerbated in the benefit packages. And so, again, with the retirements going up drastically, I think they were a little less pernicious this year, but it's the cost of labor is gonna continue to eat us alive. Because the public employee gets a better pension, he gets a better medical plan. The people in the private sector don't get the same level of benefits from their employers on average as public employees get. And, I'm not saying that they shouldn't get decent benefits, but some of this stuff has been a fiasco. That's developed, it's sort of like the town hall I talked about 38 years ago. Well, about the same time, they decided that the school teachers would do better if they threw in with the rest of the pensioners in the state and let the whole thing be administered by one pension board. You're saving all kinds of money on administration costs. But here we are, 35 years later, and you have these pensions going out to the highest paid people, $80,000 to $140,000 a year. And school teachers don't get those kind of pensions, but their contributions that we pay in on the level, the numbers of people who are educational professionals versus the number of the rest of the public employees, it's a large number. So there's a cost there that's not being mitigated. It's just gonna continue to, and so it's hard because, we wanna make sure that the people at the bottom, I think, of the pay scales, are compensated well. And I think that I saw that, in the proposed budget, the police chief isn't gonna make much more money than the deputy, chief. So, I mean, that's, on the face of it, it looks like about the same, but then, you know, what about the fringe benefits, and how, is the total cost benefit package gonna be more or about the same? But, at least we've seen some, you know, movement, the selectmen have, done some work in terms of getting these, pay increases for the highest paid employees down to 2% and 2.5%, and that's, over the long term, that would help. But, it's gonna be labor, it's gonna continue to be, the total cost of labor and the total cost benefit package of the employee, and as you were saying, Jack, you know, people can't see it. You know, they say, oh, well, they're just getting this much percentage increase, you know, what's wrong with that? And people can't see the total cost benefit of the employees, you know, pushing us against the wall on our taxes.
Anything else? Any comment from the public? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Croc Tape.